getting comfortable so I can speak with you. Thank you for those kind words of introduction and the need to make a will. But because I do this work all the time, and recent events, it's come to mind that some of the terms that we use in the office, because we use them every day, people just don't understand these terms. So today, I'm just going to go through some of the legal terms about the will, and hopefully you'll understand. If not, there's a question time at the end. So first, to introduce, I'm Kelvin Bamfield. I'm the CEO of Thai888 Law Company, and recently we started up Abroad Funerals for a number of reasons. We just wanted to make it easier for people because people were coming in asking advice. Can we tell them this, this and this? So we decided to join these two companies together to make one office to facilitate all the needs of people. So Abroad Funerals, that's here now. We are streamlining the system. We have people in place for embassy in Bangkok and around the country, but we're basically concentrating on Pattaya area. So we will be talking about the last will and testament. If there's time, I'll run up a slide on living wills as well. Probate is fraught with legal minefields and issues, and we can circumvent some of those or preempt some of those. So bear with me while I go through that with you. We've got a couple of case studies which are current. We didn't cherry pick anything. These are real case studies, events happening, but I can't really talk about the people involved because we have some client attorney privilege there, but you can get the idea from what we're talking about. So this presentation is not legal advice, so don't quote me on things and say Kelvin said this and all the rest. This is just a talk at a club for expats. Now, sometimes I get off track and I start to waffle a bit, but bear with me. I'm only human. So, because pre-COVID, no one wanted to talk really about death and everything. You know, it's a down subject, but because we've got COVID here now, people just have to come to terms with life and death. So the case studies, again, they're true life experiences, but we try to change the names to not hide, but we don't want to have any alignment with anything that could cause litigation later on. Okay, one of my favourite quotes is from John Lennon: "Life is what happens to you while you are busy making other plans." So in a previous presentation, I talked a lot about your life and how you work and go to school and get married and have children, and you save and you invest and you get a house and a car and you move on. Well, when life stops, all of that has to be reversed. Your identity changes, your assets, they're all about to change. And so you need to plan for that change. If you don't plan, you will fail, as some of the scenarios I'll give you today will show you. Now, everyone knows what a will is, the testament. So the person who's the testator is the person who's writing that will. Right? You can go off to a lawyer and get it done, that's all fine. But the testator is that person. Now, to be the testator in a will, you have to prove your identity. So in our wills, we state that I, Kelvin Bamfield, my passport number or my driver's license number or some proof and form of ID is placed into the will. If not, then that opens the door for some litigation later on to say, well, that person's not who we think it is because we checked their passport and it's not them. So you need supporting documents for that. So we photocopy the passport and on the passport, whether you realise it or not, it's got your date of birth, it's current, and down the bottom you'll see a whole lot of little L's and backward L's and things like that. These are, when you go through customs or immigration, things like that, these are linked to a database that says who you are. Right? So it's irrefutable evidence that you are that person, that testator in the will. So CCC means the Civil and Commercial Code of Thailand. This is Thai law, section 1654. In the will, you state that you're of sound mind and body. Right? If you don't, then later, if something goes wrong in court, they can use the Competency Act, doesn't matter whether it's here or overseas, as I'll explain later on, that you're not competent. You weren't competent enough to sign that will. So this is just for the testator up here. Their ID, supporting documents, and they must be competent. Now, proving competent, it's another interesting fact here, because this is a hard one to get your head around, but at the time when that person signed the will, they were in front of two witnesses. Right? It wasn't 1 month before, and it's not after, it's at that time. That precise time when you're sitting in the office, signing in front of two witnesses, and you're signing yourself. So at the time, it becomes very, very important if it has to go to court. Because you might say that person was okay 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 1 week ago. But at the time, if something was happening, they may not have been competent. Now, you have the beneficiaries. These sections are part of the Thai law, which covers your will. So the incompetence part comes in section 1704. Now, the beneficiary is very important in the will as well. So what we do with our wills is we attach their ID as well, because we have to identify who that person is. Now, it could be the Thai partner, so it would be their Thai ID. If it's someone overseas, it could be their license. Normally it's their passport, but not everyone has that. There's a whole bunch of things there about beneficiaries. If the person's under 20 years old, they can inherit, but they would need a controller of property, which means that they're not of age to accept some of those benefits. And so they're held in a form of trust for the controller of property for the time until that person gets to the age of 20. Now there are things called oral wills. There's a whole bunch of wills you can use. Oral wills aren't so much used anymore. They were used during the war when soldiers were dying in battle, so they could whisper to the priest, please do this. But nowadays an oral will, it's not going to stand up in court. So when someone comes into the office to sign with us, we take a picture of them sitting upright, healthy looking, signing in front of our two staff, our two legal staff. Now, when you present a picture like that in court, if there's a challenge, it's pretty hard to challenge that person wasn't competent when they signed the will. There's a picture proving them sitting up by themselves, smiling with two staff. So it's very important to understand competency. Now, you come to the second part of the will, which is who's going to get what. Now, we always have a clause there which says, here's this beneficiary, but if they die before me, the next beneficiary will inherit. Now, the reason you do that is because if that clause is not there and it has to go to court, then they would have to have a hearing on why that person should be the next beneficiary. If it's written in the will that the real beneficiary dies, predeceased as they call it, then the alternate beneficiary automatically is instated as the sole beneficiary. So it's important to have an alternate for those things. Now, beneficiaries have the right to challenge. Right? So it's not the closed door. You can, when the original will or a will is presented to the court, the judge does decide who or that will is legal or not. And anybody, interested party they're called, any interested party can make a challenge. But they do need to use their own lawyer to say a conflict of interest. You can't just have the one lawyer, you have to have your own if you're challenging. Now, when to challenge? There's a submission to get a court date, and when the court date is given and you go to the court, then anyone who has a challenge should do it then. They would need their own lawyers, their own translators, everything to appeal to the court on that day that they would like to challenge as an interested party. So you need to have your own people if you're going to go that way. The other thing too is when you go to court, I go 4 or 5 times a month, you'd have to give testimony. And it's, the Thais get up and do their oath in Thai, and then I do my I solemnly swear to tell the truth. So help me God, that sort of thing. So if you get up there and you tell something that's not true, that's perjury, and it's a criminal offence, and it's you can get into a lot of trouble if not deported and everything else. Plus, you will lose your benefit if you've made a claim and it's not true. So as a beneficiary, you might have said something you shouldn't have. Under Thai law, you will lose your benefit. Now, okay, so we've gone through the testate or the beneficiary. Now, the role of the next of kin, it's called a knock. That's a family member, a blood relative. And what happens is when they find out about the death, then they 9 times out of 10 don't know what to do. So we've had great experience with this. So we have an email which we send to them, and they fill in their name, and then that is sent to the embassy in Bangkok. So for example, if it's an American, we would send them the outline of the email stating who they are and proving some identification. Then they would nominate someone to go to the embassy to pick up. It's called a letter of release. Right? So without a letter of release from the embassy, you won't be able to retrieve the body, you won't be able to do the cremation or the hospital bills or the police or anything. You need that letter of release. And the only way to get one is through the next of kin. And it's a form of power of attorney, but it's very limited. It's limited in the fact that it's only for getting the letter of release and preparing for the funeral and maybe engaging the funeral and cremation, and that's it. That's how limited it is from the family. So when you've got the letter of release, it's backwards and forwards to the police, to the hospital, to pay the bills, to release things, and then arranging the temple. And because the person's name is on the email, you can't change it halfway through. That person needs to follow through to the embassy, the police, or the rest of it, because their name is on the power of attorney. Now, if something happens to that person, then it has to start again, the whole process. So that's the power that particular document has. You can't change it halfway through, you can't give it to someone else, because every time you go somewhere with that power of attorney, they will say, oh, that's not your name. Who are you? Where's your passport? Where's your ID? Now, in the will itself, there's a player called the executor. They're like the administrator. And you can have two, you can have several if you want, but that will complicate things. My experience is that when you have a co-executor, that's probably just a safeguard to make sure that the lawyer or whoever doesn't run off with everything, because it takes two people to sign. But in having two people to sign, it also complicates everything. That means everywhere you go to the court, or the police, or the hospital, or the banks, or the land office, or the motor registration, you need two people. If something happens to one of the executors, then there's an issue, because it has to go back to court. So the way we write our will is that I'm normally the executor, but given that I'm 65 years old, some people are worried that I'm going to pop off. And so we put in there as a fail-safe Thai888 law, or a representative of, because if you have a will and it's structurally sound, then if the executor pops off, you can go to another law company and they can pick it up. They have to make an application to the court, but they can continue on the work because it's a valid will. Okay, so we've gone a little bit ahead there. So the NOC, you understand the NOC is responsible for certain things, but it's very limited. The executor has most of the power. Now, to having established, or maybe not establishing that there's a will, so there's several wills, someone has to lead, someone has to take it to court, and then you have to apply for what's called a grant of probate. But first of all, a lawyer has to write what's called a plaint, because the plaint says why I need to go to court to the judge. Why do I need court time? And have you got all the documents together? Are you ready for court? Right? Then when someone at the public prosecutor's office checks, they will see that everything's in order and they will put forward a date. Now at the moment, or even before COVID, we're looking at 3 months to get a court date. So don't expect an instant court date. It just doesn't happen. 3 months you're looking at. So when you have a court date, that's when the executor or the person who wants to be an executor or the documents go to the court to be determined on whether what's real or what's not real. Only the judge can do that. So does anyone know what this is? It's in Thai. Right, so you understand you're in Thailand and all the documents are in Thai, all of them. So you'll be signing things that you don't know what you're signing. So without legal representation, you could be signing something that you don't know. You could be signing everything away, your power, your rights, the whole thing. So you've got to really be careful with what you're signing, because there's hundreds of documents from the police, the temple, the hospital, the morgue. All of these things you'd be blindly signing. But we have staff in place for all this. We have translators, we have these people. This is actually your will, what you just saw in time. So the other thing about what's important about your will is where it was made. Because that shows the jurisdiction and the law that will govern this if it has to go to probate. So you see here, it says it comes under the Civil and Commercial Code of Thailand. So that document has jurisdiction here with the courts, and we always specify that this will covers Thailand only, because from experience with England and America and things like that, the tax man will come swooping in. And I'm not saying to avoid tax, I'm just saying that your assets here, and if they wanted to ask you, which they do, Her Majesty's Court Tribunal system in England has a question on their inheritance tax forms, I think it's 2.2, please list worldwide assets. Really? You're going to tell them you've got a condo here, you're going to tell them you've got bank accounts here? But the will here states that this is the jurisdiction of Thailand under Thai law. So if they want to mount a challenge, they have to go to court. And I don't know any case where that's happened. None. Anyway, so if you engage a lawyer in the UK, for example, they will press you because they're under penalty of perjury for putting something down that's not correct. So I asked them the question, what is your threshold? £325,000. Okay, how far are we away from that? And they might give me a figure, and so I can tell them the condo here was worth $20,000 or pounds, and it fits under the 40% tax that they have in England for inheritance. So there's ways to do this. I'm not saying it's the right way or the wrong way, but it's just Thai law here. So just remember that everything's in the Thai language. If you've got assets overseas, then you need those documents, the death certificate, the will, a whole bunch of things, certified by the consulate in Bangkok, by the Department of Foreign Affairs. When they're certified, translated, and signed off by the embassy, then you can send them overseas, then they can start probate in another country. So it gets a little bit complicated there. Now, a handwritten will is acceptable. However, there's a format for it. Now, made at determines the jurisdiction. Made at Pattaya, Thailand, which brings it into Thai law. If that's not there, it could be anywhere that you could come under a different foreign law. Now, the date is important, of course, and then again, establishing who you are. If you're writing this by hand, which is perfectly legal, you have to state who you are, and again, you should prove who you are by your passport or some form of identification. Where you live, because now you look at immigration, every 90 days, you go there and tell them where you live. Now, if things don't match up, it could make a problem. Now, again, here, I was told it's not mandatory, but stating that you're of sound mind and body is a typical format for this written will. And then that you would like to leave your assets to someone. Again, you should determine who that person is. Their full name and some kind of identification. Because if you just put down there, I'm going to leave everything to David, how does the court know who David is? You could have 10 Davids. I've got 10 Davids on my phone. So you need to establish these things if you're going to write your own will. And of course, you need to sign it. And it doesn't need to be witnessed. So to save problems, if you're going to do it by this format. It's available online to download. And you'll save any problems in the future. So it comes under the Civil and Commercial Code of Thailand, so it's perfectly legal, section 1657, if you want to look it up. Now this is a tricky one. When you die intestate, there's a couple of reasons why this can kick in. You didn't do a will, all right? That's the number one reason why dying intestate, meaning you've got no will, we don't know who to contact, where your bank accounts are, or who is going to administer the will, who's going to be the executor. So when something like that happens, it turns, it really makes a lot of extra work. For example, most of my work is with foreigners, and most of them have family or assets overseas. And so we need to contact those people, but we need to try and find out who they are. So we contact the embassy, they do their work, and they get back to us. Now, if you don't have a will, there's a thing called the law of succession, which comes in this order. Because you're dead, who's going to get your assets? Who's going to look after things? So it comes, the first one, into children. Full blood children. The second one are your parents. Then brothers and sisters. So normally within the first two there, the descendants, if they would be the people inheriting, and you can let them fight it out. Parents, rarely does it get down to brothers and sisters, full blood, and then half blood. So someone might be from another marriage, another wife, or adopted, something like that. So this is what happens if you die intestate. Now, many of the cases we do at the moment, the principal act that the other lawyers try to do is prove that the person who wrote the will was incompetent, therefore the will is null and void, therefore they died intestate. That's the game plan. And I'll show you a few scenarios soon to enforce that.
Hey, Kelvin, can I interrupt one question? You put surviving spouse at the bottom.
Yeah.
So that's last? So if you are legally married, the children inherit?
If you're married, it's okay. But this is intestate, dying intestate.
Right.
Who's going to take care of things? But normally, there's a provision there for the wife. That's a whole new subject. But dying intestate is exactly how that goes by succession. And then if you look at that will, I can send it to you later on. It's a whole new subject. So let's have a look at what's probate. What could go wrong?
It was not in the list. You said that the children are the one in the first priority. The wife must be the first priority.
As I said, that's another subject because this is intestate, and this is by Thai law how that's looked at by the courts. So I can come back and give another talk on that point, or send you something by mail. Because we have a lot to cover, and I'm just trying to let you understand what dying intestate means and the problems that it will cause. Now, of course, the spouse, the wife, she's an interested party in the estate, so they can mount a challenge, and that's when it gets sticky. Right? When everyone fronts up to the court, they've all got a different lawyer, and they've all got a different agenda. The record to date is 5. We went to a case, French guy, no will, same thing. Ex-wife turns up, girlfriend turns up, proxies from the company, shares turn up. 5 different sets fighting it out in the court. But it's a whole new subject. I'll cover that one. So what could go wrong? And as someone's pointed out, wrong is spelled wrong because that's what happens. It's wrong. Okay, first of all, you can't just go to the court. You need a lawyer because it's all in Thai and they have to write the plaint. requesting court time, 3 months as I said. Now we've got COVID, which is, it's actually been a benefit to the court system here because we've been doing this for a few years, and on nearly all the cases, the judge has said, I want the executor here in this court to give testimony. And we've used everything. They're sick, they have no passport, they're too old to move, anything like this. And it was all mostly rejected. Only one judge said, okay, I'll hear this, because they had a power of attorney to act for the family. So since COVID, no one can fly in, no one. So we front up to court and say, Your Honour, the executor can't give testimony, but we have a power of attorney. So they talk a little bit and they say, yeah, okay. So the last 6 cases, no problem. They've allowed me to be the executor without issue. So the COVID's worked in a good way, but also it's complicated there because if, say the executors in Australia, then they would have to send me a letter to resign as the executor. Then I make an application to the court to be the executor. So it's a little bit like this. Then when they appoint me the executor, I've got 15 days to resign. After 15 days, then there's another 30 days of challenges. People come forward like money owed on the condo to the bank or someone else, right? Those creditors come forward. And as the administrator, I have to look at those and judge their value. Now, when I go to court, I have to answer certain questions. Just basically, right? What is your name? For me, the judge is asking, how old are you? So it goes from the judge up here to the lawyer here, to the translator here, to me in the dock. So it's like the Three Stooges slapped in a funny sort of way. Where are you working? Where do you live? Now, referring to the case, why are you here? And they hold up power of attorney and everything entire. Is this what you're referring to? And I go, yeah, because my lawyers have taken care of all that. When did the person die? What did they die of? Where did they die? Where was their address? What assets do they have? And things like this. So I'm giving testimony in the court for this. Now, because I've sworn an oath to not lie, if I'm caught lying or being deceptive in any way, hiding documents or something like that, I'm in deep trouble, seriously. And I'm not going to jeopardize that because it's taken years to build our company, so I'm not going to do that for one single case. So we put that one aside and I do everything above board. And then the last question they ask me is, am I competent? Again, this competent word comes in. Am I a bankrupt? Am I a criminal? Am I crazy? And I have to answer that no. So then I get 17 days to resign because I don't know if you guys have made wills, but a lot of people make wills and they make their friend the executor, and their friend doesn't know until they get the call to say, you've got to go to court to do this. When they start running the gauntlet of all the legal things and the challenges and the whole bit, they resign. They say, and 100% of the time now they have resigned, given it to me. So when you name your friend and they don't know about it, they've got that 15-day clause there to resign. Now the other thing, if someone passes away, I normally get there with my phone and I make a non-stop video of from the front door all the way through the condo, every single item there, including the safe. If we have to break into the safe, I get the safe crackers down. Non-edited video is the only way to do it because it's got cuts in there, you can cut out stuff, or we remove this from the safe, we did this, we did that, right? Now, that's called an inventory, and by law, section 1728, you have to do an inventory. A lot of people forget that, but sometimes there's big estates and valuable art and cars and houses, that sort of thing. Now, when the judge says you've got the grant of probate, and they give me a court order that says I can do all this stuff. So effectively what happens is the court is transferring the testator's assets to me. You understand that? Because without transferring it to me, I can't go to the bank, I can't go to the land office or the motor registration to change things over because they're not mine. So the court order says, Kelvin, you have 12 months to move all this stuff around, liquidate it, send it all back to the beneficiaries. So you understand that process. You've got 12 months. So if there's a condo involved, you've got 6 months until you've got a court order, and then from that 6 months, you've got 12 months to sell the condo or the house or the company, right? You can't hang on to it. You can't give it to an overseas person because they're a non-resident. That's a funny law. It comes into the Condo Act, section 19, which says that if something like this happens, that person dies, that property has to be transferred. All right? So there's a couple of ways around that. I've got properties on the books for 4 years now because there were banks around and I wanted to buy them. And I lowered the price so much to try and sell them, and they're still sitting there, and I couldn't do it. So I went to the land office and I paid them a small amount of money to put them in a holding pattern, like a plane. 4 years now I've had these condos, can't get rid of them. So when I get a seller, when I get a buyer, I will go back to the land office and they will release it and then the transaction can go through. But by law, you're supposed to get rid of that condo within 12 months. All the cars, the bikes, the assets, I don't know how many bikes we've got that we gave to the police, cars, because no one wanted them. And I think now with COVID, it's particularly difficult to sell anything off. So I keep them on the books and give them away or do what I do. But I work with the beneficiaries in saying, do you need this $300 bike? And they say, no, I'll give it to the police, all right? So I get it all in writing. Yes, yes, yes. All right. Now, when everything's liquidated, there's some money left. I have to send that to another country or to the people here. If it goes to the other country, there's a thing called AMLO, which is the Anti-Money Laundering Office. So you've got to run through them because you're transferring money out of Thailand. And sometimes it's millions that you're transferring out. So why are you doing this? And then we have to show all the paperwork again. So my name has to be on the grant, of course, go to the bank, shift it through my bank account without incurring any tax problems myself. So it gets a little bit difficult there. Now, what could go wrong? Some case studies here. This is current, this one. There's he wasn't that old, 54, passed away, but he came to see me in was 2019, and we looked at everything. There was a lot of condominiums, 30 condominiums here, another 15 or so in Chiang Mai. And when we heard about it, I contacted the embassy. I went through the procedures, rang up the embassy, and they said, sorry, we can't deal with you. And I said, but I'm the executor. Someone's already applied. How could they apply? I'm the executor, I've got the will here. Anyway, they said, under the Privacy Act, they can't talk to me. And I said, oh, okay, so how do I get this will, our will, to the person who's acting as the next of kin? They said, send it to us, and we'll send it to them. Okay? Now, that means that that person who was the executor of the 2017 will knew about our will, which was dated 2019. So when that sort of thing happens, that means that the old will is revoked. So that's another important word, revoked. If you've got a will overseas, make sure it says that other wills aren't revoked. It only applies to England, it only applies to America or Germany, not to the Thai will. So, we've got this problem now because the embassy's involved. They've released documents to this person who wasn't the correct person. They've gone off and done the cremation, the funeral, the whole thing, and started cleaning out the bank accounts. Now, what we did was jump on a plane, go up there, because they started the action in Chiang Mai. So that disadvantaged us because we'll have to go to Chiang Mai. 8 times now we've been to Chiang Mai. The first time we go to court, they didn't turn up. And that's their right. The first time, don't turn up. Didn't tell us. We had airplanes, hotels, everything. 8 people. So this is how they run it. Their other lawyer is running it this way, like wind us up, all that sort of thing. So we fly to Chiang Mai. Now, the interesting thing about competency comes into this case. When a case has to be heard, there's a thing called discovery. Americans will probably know about this. That means that if they have some evidence that we should be aware of, they need to show us because we don't need a surprise in court. So they had a photo of this chap who died just before, and he was on a drip, and not looking well, all that sort of thing. And so my lawyers looked at it and said, how do we get around this one? I said, well, every person with a smartphone here, every time you take a picture, there's a timestamp on it. And there's a GPS location on it. So we looked at the metadata on the phone, the picture, and I showed the lawyers what it was all about. And they said, So when we were in court, the defendants are waving the picture around saying, we have a picture, like powerful picture. And so the question that our lawyers asked were, can you show us the metadata of this photo? They couldn't. So it's inadmissible. So you have to be careful with this incompetent thing. People can claim things, but they need to be able to prove it. The second thing they came up was, how come my staff had to go and see him to sign the will? They suggested that he was too sick to be able to travel. And our reply in the court was, no, Your Honour, this guy has 50 condos. It's the largest asset base we've handled. We consider him to be a VIP, and we went to see him. So all my staff, nicely dressed, everything, stamps, the whole bit, they went to see him, and he was at work, wheeling and dealing in his development world and his banking world and all the rest of it. No problem. So we undid the second reason for claiming incompetency. All right, so we win the case. So what does any good defence lawyer do? They mount an appeal. Right? Now, again, they mounted an appeal. We all get on the plane, we go up there. They didn't turn up again. Same judge, he said, I'm done. And he ruled in our favour, so we won the court case, we won the appeal. Then a letter of return. So he's already got all the goods because he went to the banks with his grant from the court, and they released 6 million baht to him, plus the cars, plus everything else. So he's busy running around collecting all these things. And then we win the appeal, and he has to return the assets to us. So he ignored that letter. totally ignored it. So what we did, we went to the police and said under their own criminal code that he'd actually embezzled funds. So on, what's the day, the 4th, on the 8th, he now has to come from Chiang Mai to Pattaya 9 police station to answer for embezzling from the estate. And I don't think they've got any answers, but we're willing to compromise on this sort of thing. But this is how difficult things can be. Our will is 100% perfect, that's why it stood up in court. But they can delay things through tactics and try and wear you down, make us travel to Chiang Mai, run our costs up, that sort of thing. It didn't work. Now the guy's facing some serious time in jail. I don't want to bore you too much, but we'll just sort of go through a few things. Another case here, which is important because wherever you're domiciled, like meaning where you live, it has a big impact on the way the court case is going to run. Now, this chap, he's a Singapore citizen. He's got business in Singapore, China, Hong Kong, Australia, Thailand. Now, again, they bring out this competency thing. So we weren't involved in this because it happened in China. The guy has an episode and they said there's something wrong with the brain. Maybe it was a hematoma or something. He was flown from there to Thailand where he was domiciled, and he had a company in Bangkok, and they operated on him. And at that time, his brother came in from Australia, so we had Australia to the list, and they got him to sign a will. The picture, the head here was, it's quite awful to look at, but it sort of caved in because the bone wasn't put in place there. So what they decided to do is to cover their ass, to cover themselves. They got in a forensic doctor to certify that he was competent. Not only that, there was 7 people in the room. There was 3 witnesses to the will, and down the bottom of the will, it said, under penalty of perjury, that they are competent and that the person signing the will was competent. Right? So under penalty of perjury, right down the bottom there. Then on top of that, they videotaped the whole thing of the doctor asking questions of him to see if he was competent. Everything passed, will, witnesses, that one, right? Now, what the lawyers here did, because this is involved in other countries, they decided to run the case in China first. Now, I don't know, anyone here been to China or had any legal issues with China? I had to brush up online and check, and it said basically it's so corrupt. The court system, the witnesses, the whole thing. And most of the time the judge will not listen to the witnesses because they've been bought off. So they run this court case in China. It's all in Chinese, the whole bit, right? And the lawyer there, for us, called a plaintiff because they were defending this court order, they said that he was incompetent. With all that evidence, witnesses, video, and a forensic doctor, and they ruled that because the lawyer had apparently been paid off in China to not submit that evidence. So they had nothing to go on. And the thing that really got me was they said they didn't understand what was in the document. If you've ever been a witness to anything, or any notary, when you go and get a signature notarized, it's not their job to know what's in the document. Not at all. They are there to witness you signing. So they claimed in court that they didn't know what they were signing. It's irrelevant. It could have been in Hebrew or anything. It doesn't matter. A notary is only there to sign, to say, you sat in front of them, you look like your passport, and I saw them sign that with the same pen as I used. That's it. Right? So they use that. Anyway, that's being appealed at the moment. And the reason why it's so important is because if they have a win in China, they bring it to the Thai court, and the Thai court will recognise a precedent that's happened in another country. They will take it into consideration because they don't want to hear it all again. This case, maybe 100, 150 million bahts worth that we know about. So it's worth, you know, the other person here, the other beneficiary, to win this case. But also you've got the wife in Singapore, you've got the other wife in China, there's some gold missing, there's a whole bunch of things. So the estate could be worth a lot more. So I'm just saying to you, you can do everything, the great will, the video, the forensic doctor, but if you don't have a lawyer batting for you when you go into court, you're going to lose, and then you have to appeal. So our client has to fly from Australia to there, and he's not a young man, and he's done it a dozen times, and plus all of these things have to be certified by embassies and go to court, and you don't understand what they're saying and that sort of thing. So you're relying on people quite a lot. Anyway, that's where we're up to there. This is a sensitive one. If you have an old will and you suddenly have an episode and you decide to make a holographic will, handwritten one, as I explained before, you have to fill in those points, otherwise it may be ruled as invalid. Then it would go back to the other will. But that's not up to me to determine that, that's up to the court and the judge. So all we can do is go to court with a will, submit it, and then the other people can submit their will, and then points of law come out where they say, well, that's right, that's wrong, that's right, that's wrong. And then the judge will rule whether that is admissible or not. It's not up to me. Again, at the time when you do something, that's when you're accountable, not before and not after, at the time. And it comes all the way through Thai law. At the time you were drunk, when you hit the pole, not a week before, at the time. So it's very important to remember. So you understand what a knock is, next of kin, power of attorney, executor, probate, legal issues. If you have any documents that you haven't submitted, then by law you're required to do that through disclosure. And then of course you have to testify. So if you're padding the nest sort of thing in court, on the stand, by not saying everything you should or not submitting everything you should, you've got to believe that you're going to be cross-examined, you know? So you could come unstuck, and it's not a place to be guilty of perjury here. Plus, if you misdirect the court, they will rule that you miss out on your benefit. And again, the condos have to be sold, everything wrapped up in 12 months, if possible. How are we going for time? Are you bored yet?
That's interesting.
Okay, we'll keep going a bit. This is my mother's will. One of them, she had 3. Now, this is off the newsagent, so it's all typed up. So there's a particular law that applies to this as well. If you get partially typed and partially written, then the same pen and your witnesses have to be in the same room signing at the same time. You can see there that, I don't know if you can see it, but my mother's omitted the date on that one. There's a few other things wrong there. Her handwriting, this is basically my mother's handwriting here, but handwriting up here is not hers at all. So it's been written by someone else with my mother adding things here. you can't add stuff into the will unless you countersign it by two people. So my mother's added the dates in there, she's scrubbed out things. She's done a whole lot of interesting things there. Anyway, see, here it states too down the bottom that all pages have to be dated down there where the little arrow is. Here is not filled in, so this is void. That will was invalid. Then they found another one. I call this the shopping list will. So she's got partially right there, it's a date, and it's written in her handwriting, and it does cover people with their dates of birth and things like that. So partially right. Scrubbing out some bits here, which is not valid. And I call this a codicil, which is after you've written your will, you can make a change to it. So normally I would say that's for other assets or small changes, but not to change beneficiaries. You have to rewrite the will for that. And you see JB down there, that's definitely not my mother's signature. She didn't do things like that. So this was heard in the Queensland court, in the Supreme Court. And Queensland has different laws to the rest of Australia. So this shopping list will was the one that was approved by the court. It was interesting. Unexpected, but fair enough. Then it was overturned, then it was appealed. Cost was $25,000. So here the cost of going to court for probate would be, Australian dollars would be $3,000 to get a grant. So the costs here are very good. This is Laurie from the Pattaya City Expats Club.
Yep.
He died a few years back. Now his will was ruled invalid because that's his will there. His kids gave me permission to use this for educational purposes. Because it's typed, it has to be signed by two witnesses, and Laurie only had one witness there, so that was thrown out. Then, of course, the succession rule comes in. He died intestate, basically. So then, the irony about this one was that the kids in Australia, the two sons, called me and said, "Can you take care of everything?" And at that particular time, Laurie and I were the best of friends, and the children gave me the power of attorney to arrange funeral and probate. There was about 5 hearings because they had to resign, 2 of them, and then I could pick it up, and then I could go back and backwards and forwards to get it right. Again, I was appointed by a power of attorney. The court sanctioned that. The other thing in dealing with my company is we don't have a conflict of interest because we're not beneficiaries. The only thing we get out of this is a court fee. So if we were beneficiaries, you know, with a substantial payout, then there could be a possible conflict of interest. But because we only get a salary for a fee for running this to the court, there's no conflict of interest. So if you want a will done, all that sort of thing, for club members, we offer the 50% discount. This is some of the reviews we got. There was an Australian couple over here, and they had to get a codicil, which is an addendum to their will, through the Law Society in Australia, and they saw our will and they said it was one of the best they've ever seen. Even commenting on the paper, and I think, oh wow, you know. But it was comprehensive enough in 2 languages for them to. I think they've stolen our format now. So anyway, that was from John Neat. This one, just quickly, this was a lady from UK. Her father died, and she had work and family and everything in England, and she didn't have a clue what to do. She found us, and then I talked to her on the phone for a long time, told her what she has to do. And in those days, she had to fly out because she was the executor, and so the court demanded she fly out. And she hit the ground, jet lagged, didn't know what she was doing, boom, 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 boom. Next thing, she's in court giving testimony, and the next thing, we're having lunch down on the ocean. All done, all dusted. So her review is up on our website. There's a satisfied customer as far as language and running the gauntlet of all these things that go wrong. Just quickly, a little bit about us. We started off as 1 office, we've now got 2, we've got 8 staff, and some ring-ins. My office is for wills and funerals and that, because under Thai law I can't act as an attorney. So the second office, number 12, has all of the notaries, lawyers, accountants, all of the certified people, and I separated that because immigration was well, worried, I suppose, about me. But my work permit now says that I can do all this sort of work. Because under probate, all those rules, a normal person can do that, a natural person can do that. You don't have to be a lawyer. If you want to go and do it for the experience, try. But you don't have to be a lawyer, but you have to use a lawyer to get to court, and a translator and every other thing. We have all those things for your service. We've now got 4 lawyers, because last week two of our staff that we put through uni, they passed the bar exam, which is great. We've got 2 paralegals that are still studying, 2 notaries. We have a group in Bangkok. They're actually part of Jep's family, my partner Jep, and they take care of the more hospitals, all that, and they stationed in Lopburi, so it's quicker for them to come to Bangkok and do everything. Plus we pay them for that. We're registered at a DBD on both companies. There's 1 foreigner work permit, mine, in my pocket, and this is some of our staff. That's Jep, she's the big boss. Me, that's us in Chiang Mai. I do the MC at the funerals. Yesterday was Richard's funeral, so I spoke there. DVD registration work permit, yes. That's us with some reviews from Google, if that's worth anything, but directions to our office are there as well. These are our wills. I bought some checklists, they're on the table over there, so if you want a checklist just to see what documents you need to give me, I've got that over there on the table, and that will help you navigate your way through this legal issue. So we made the 1 office area to make it easier for people instead of running around. They just come in and tell us what they need, or overseas, just call me, and we can do everything. I've never had a complaint. Now, questions? Now I have to put my glasses on so I can see.
Yeah, we've got time for questions. A couple at the back of the room. Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I've only lived in Thailand for a couple of years, but I made a will in England in 2016 for people in England, nothing to do with Thailand. Is that will still valid?
There are a couple of things. If we always don't put revoke wills, we always put jurisdiction. Like if it says for England only, and not revoke any other wills, yes, because you need to establish.
Sorry to interrupt you. I did leave money to my Thai partner here. I missed that bit out. Sorry, but the remainder of it is for my brother in the UK.
Okay, the complication there is if you pass away in Thailand, your death certificate and all those things have to be taken care of. So who's the executor of your will?
My brother.
So is he going to fly out here and get everything sorted out?
That I don't know. I've not broached that subject with him.
All right, at the moment he can't. No one's flying in.
Right.
So you would need to go through the power of attorney, that sort of thing. In the future, is your brother prepared to fly to Thailand and go through all those things I mentioned, or is he willing to give it to a co-executor or someone else to do the work? Because your brother wouldn't know what to do here.
Right.
So your benefit given to your partner, your brother would be in control of that from another country.
Right.
And so you've complicated things. If you made a simple will here to just say, this is Thailand, this is what I've got, this person should get it. End of the confusion, end of, so work it out. If your brother had to fly here, hotel, translator costs, all this stuff, it would be up to thousands of quid, as opposed to making a document now to get it sorted.
I'm talking the assets I've got in the UK. It's not property; it's cash in a bank in England.
Yeah.
That's nothing to do with Thailand at all.
No, it has got something to do with Thailand because you need to go and get all those certificates done in Thai language, certified and translated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and sent to your brother, who would then go to the bank to release that money.
Right.
So that's these complications that come in because you're a foreigner living in another country. But you can't just take a will and take it to Lloyd's Bank in London and say, release that. They're not going to do it. They need the death certificate, which is in Thai, and the only one that can translate that is the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Minister.
Right. So, would it be a good idea to get the lawyer who made my will in the UK to be the executor of the will? Would that help?
Well, they charge 300 quid an hour. I'd say what's in Thailand stays in Thailand, what's in
Right.
England stays in England. All you got to worry about is the official documents getting translated. So you just separate those two things. If you've got some money here in the bank, what I've told a lot of clients before, have a little black book and give it to someone who you trust with your ID, right, and your PIN code number, and all the rest of it, so that if something happens to you, that person can go off to the ATM and get the money out.
Right. Okay. So effectively, I've got to make another UK will in Thailand.
No.
No.
You need to give the beneficiary here, your partner, your asset, right, in the future, so that she could go off to the ATM or whatever and get the money out.
Right.
It's a simple document there. You know, I'll give you a checklist, you can work it all out, come and see me in the office.
Right. Right. I don't actually live in Padua. I live up in just outside Chiang Rai.
Yeah, it can be done.
Okay.
What we do in that case, if it's somewhere else, we put the will together and you would have your two witnesses up there in Chiang Mai, and we would send a pen in the packet with it, and you would have your two witnesses there when you sign it, and it's all perfectly legal.
Right. What's the minimum age the witness can be?
Over 15.
Oh, 50. Right. Okay.
Yeah, but you can get anyone, they're just witnessing the signature.
Right.
Mm.
Okay. That's it
All right.
basically. Yeah. Okay.
Next.
Ian Nicholson.
Kelvin, my passport number has changed. Do I need to update the will?
No, you need to send a photocopy of the new one so that the person holding the will can attach it You don't need a rewrite.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
just photocopy, attach.
Send it to you.
Yeah, the whole thing with a will is, it's a roadmap for the person who has to administer everything when you pass away. And if we don't know where things are, and they get lost in the system, the bank can just sit there and go, oh, it's 7 years, we can take everything now because no one can claim it. Or this and that. So any change, like a new car, condo, whatever, just photocopy it, put it with your will. But more important, have some card there, business card, or someone who knows who to contact so that these things can run smoothly. Yeah. So I always tell people, grab my card, stick it in the back of your passport, staple it in. The first thing the police look for is your passport. So you don't want them ringing their friends or whatever, or come around and have a party, and then we get there 2 hours late. You know, between the lines there.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, is it possible to have two separate wills, entirely two separate wills in two countries?
Yeah, of course. Of course. So I always advise people, like, our will state, this will is for Thailand only. If we do a will in Australia, for example, it has to be notarized. It's perfectly legal, but it's separate, because we do that for tax reasons, for jurisdiction reasons, for a whole bunch of things. Different laws in different countries, and if you specify this as a Thailand will, no problem. You specify this as a UK or USA, no problem. But don't put revoke, that word revoke, don't use that word.
Okay. Just one last comment. I was the beneficiary of a will in the UK some years ago, and the other beneficiaries, they poisoned the particular person I was caring for against me. And then when she passed away, she was in her 90s, she was registered blind, etc. And the solicitors had lost the will. So I said, can you rely on the previous will, which benefited my daughter like 80%? And they said, no, we're going to use this copy of a will. And to my astonishment, probate accepted a copy.
I've been totally shocked at some of the findings in the court, hence the appeal mechanism. Because when you appeal, they can't introduce any more evidence. You have to attack what was given. The court gave their judgment based on what evidence was in front of them. So if they said, like that Chinese one, that the guy was incompetent, that's because they never showed the video. They never showed the testimony by saying under penalty of perjury, things like that. So those couple of points we can appeal on. They can't introduce anything else into the court for that hearing, only those points. So in your particular case, like, I'm sorry to say that the UK, I've dealt with them and I'm still dealing with them, and they're a monstrous headache, absolute monster headache for HM, Her Majesty's Court Tribunal Services.
That's right. There was another aspect to the will as well. I was left £500, and previously I'd been left nothing, which I was aware of because I was an executor. But my daughter was left about 80% of the will, and as I'm seriously ill with various complications, I didn't want to inherit anything anyway. But to my astonishment, as I say, she left me £500, and I didn't think she would left me 1 cent. I think this was done through the solicitors so that I wouldn't challenge the will.
That's normally the case. I've been left $20 before.
Yeah, the old-fashioned thing was you should leave your worst enemy silver payment, and then you go and challenge the will. Is that
Exactly. You know, leave all the kids $20, and then they say they can't. We didn't get anything. They did. They got $20.
Yes.
So yeah, that's an old trick, that one.
Right. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, any more?
Yeah, one there.
Good afternoon. You mentioned Richard. I went to the temple last week. I also wanted to go to the cremation. Was there a reason there was no announcement? Was it required for some? Are you prepared to expand on that?
Well, okay. I'm under attorney-client privilege with James, the son. So I'm dealing with him. So what happened was the Thursday week before, we announced that there would be a funeral cremation. And again, this is a good point that you've raised. We didn't have the power of attorney. Someone else had that power of attorney. And they would not go to the hospital to sign the documents to release the body for the funeral. So our hands were tied legally. We couldn't do anything because the power of attorney is a very strong document. And so the hospital would not release Richard's body. We had to apply again. So that meant England had to sign that document to send to the UK Embassy in Bangkok. They had to issue a letter of release. My staff had to go there and pick it up, and everything else, the body, the morgue, the hospital, clear the costs, all that sort of thing, to be able to have that funeral yesterday. Now, I said to James, it's not my call because I'm not the executor. If I'm named the executor in the will, I will determine how the funeral is made because I have that discretion. If it says in the will they want a basic funeral or they want 9 months or 20,000 months, I have to follow that, but I'm not involved in the will. Which will? I don't know which will. That has to be determined by the court. So James said, okay, because I have some other information that I received about people not wanting to attend and all that sort of thing. So I said to James, probably the best opportunity here is just go straight up the middle. We will have a video Facebook live for you and your mother. And then he said yes. So it wasn't our call. We're not the executor. There's 3 wills in question. Which one is right, which one is wrong? So that's what happened yesterday.
So it seems deliberate.
Same. Well,
It seems deliberate that no announcement was made.
Correct. That's what he just said.
Yeah. Put it in English.
it's not my call. It's the same like which will is right. I can't say because it's got to go to court.
Right.
If I'm not the executor, then I can't do anything.
Just a quick one now. It's me, Brian. It's me. Just a word of warning. People think that if they haven't got anything, there's no point in leaving a will. But, for instance, if you are knocked down by a bus and there's compensation involved, then that becomes part of your estate, and that can then be left to a beneficiary. So don't think that if you haven't got any assets, that you don't